This is what slow food is. Joy is good food, understanding where our food comes from.
To watch a kid pick a raspberry and eat it, and it might be the first time that that child has made contact with a plant, there's a lot of great joy when I see that happen.
Joy around food brings people together.
I don't know, it kind of took my breath away and it made me feel fantastic that you're not working alone.
When those that don't have access to food do have access to food, understanding the history of a food type, who made it, how it was preserved, that is joyful. What's injustice is when those stories are not told. Welcome, everyone. So, my name is Laura Luciano, and I am the Slow Food Governor for New York State. My home-based chapter is Slow Food East End, and I am what's called the governor for New York State, like I said, and I'm on the board for Slow Food USA. So today we have something really exciting that we are really looking forward to sharing with you, which is our Flower Power program. But before we get to that, I just want to tell you a little bit about Slow Food. Our organization is one of the largest in the United States. We are 104 chapters across the nation. We are in 160 countries. The slow food movement started in the early 80s by a gentleman named Carlo Petrini in Italy, in Torino. And what we stand for is two big pillars. One is joy and one is justice, and you can't have either or unless they're fully immersed together. So what I would like to do is have Penny introduce to us our Feed the Forks program and talk to us about Flower Power.
It's my pleasure. Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm so very excited to have you with me today and to have you with us today. It's so much to share. Laura mentioned our Feed the Forks, and before we go into Flower Power, you may have been reading about Feed the Forks, hearing about Feed the Forks. Let me just tell you a little bit about what it is. Every January, we do a strategic planning meeting with our board. We like to plan out what the year looks like. And we also like to look back to what the year was. And oh my goodness, right? Looking back at 2020, was that a full plate of things to look back? And I have to say in a proud way that our chapter really did great things last year. We started a resilience grant program to help our food producers who their life changed for them when restaurants closed and they needed a little help to get through the COVID crisis. And we wanted to help, because we are slow food, we wanted to help people eat. That is an overlying concept for us, is to make sure everybody has a full belly, a full soul, a full spirit. And then we also got to help out a lot of our local restaurants who are Snail of Approval awardees. That means they practice good, clean, and fair practices. So we looked at that and we want to look ahead. And we realized some of the things we were looking ahead to do and what we did really fell under feeding the forks. Making sure everybody is eating, making sure people are taken care of, making sure our East End community is a viable place for people to live. And we at Slow Food East End wanted to know what we could do to make it happen. So we came up with our Feed the Forks, and like Laura mentioned before, that there's joy and justice is pillars to slow food. We added our own pillars to our Feed the Fork program. One of it being our school garden program, which I can proudly say we have one of the largest school garden programs within slow food in the United States. We want to make sure our kids know where their food is coming from. And it's nice to see that some of the gardens are back up and running again, and that's exciting. But then we also said, well, what else can we do? We wanted to do our resilience grant program again. So that is something that's going to be kicking off to help local farmers, local food producers, oyster farmers. If people need help, we're there for them. We chose to help the Butterfly Effect Project, and that's a group in Riverhead that helps young girls really achieve their potential. And they wanted to start a garden, and we were like, jumped in. Yes, we're there to help you. And what else can we do to serve the Riverhead community? And last but not least, and while you're all excitedly here today to break bread, is Flour Power. So I'd like you to think I'm a genius, and I try to tell my kids I'm a genius, but we'll see if they believe that as time goes on. But I saw a program on TV where they highlighted a group in Seattle called Community Loaves. And I was so impressed with what Community Loaves was doing, which is baking bread for the needy. And I said, you know what, that's something that we can do on the East End. And I love our members. I love how our members are there to get involved with us, and we do fundraisers, and they're there donating, and they're giving us their time and their money. But you know what? I think people want to actually be a part physically of something that's going on. And what better way but to get your hands dirty by baking bread? And that's what this program is all about. So let me explain to you a little bit about how Flour Power works. And afterwards, we'll give you the opportunity, if this sounds like it's something for you, to join us and be part. Right now, anyone who joins us is like part of this pilot program. So you're going to have to put up with us if we make a little like kerfuffle here and there all along the way. We're just trying to figure this out. Like I tell everybody, we're just volunteers doing the best we can, and we try. So Feed the Forks is a program where we are baking bread, and the breads are going to be donated to food pantries and shut-ins and people who just want that experience of a home-baked bread. I mean, really, what is more nourishing for the belly and the soul and the spirit than that home-baked bread? And we realize right now that our food pantries are doing a fabulous job. They're giving people food. They're getting staples. Our farmers are donating produce. But what about that experience of a home-baked bread? And that's where Flour Power comes in. So this is how the program works. We are very fortunate, and I'm going to introduce you to David Chaffin in a little bit, who is our board member. But David is a baker, and he came up with a recipe. So right now we have a standard recipe that everyone's going to bake, and we are going to segue in a little bit to a video showing the whole process of how to bake a bread, because some of you may not know, some of you may want a refresher. I have to say, I've been baking bread for a long time, and I learned so much from watching his video. So right now we're starting with a standard recipe. Everyone is baking the same bread. So when it gets donated, everybody just pulls in, and it's not like I want that one, I want that one. It's all a standard, delicious, whole wheat, healthy recipe that is so fabulous. You're going to love it. So the recipe that you will get bakes 4 loaves, 1 for you to keep because you do have to be nourished as well, and the 3 will be donated. How does the donation process work? Well, we have drop-off points. So you are going to drop off your bread on a Monday, and at the drop-off points, I'll get to that in a minute. And then Tuesday morning, we have volunteers who will pick up those breads and bring it to our distribution center. We're starting small. We want to make sure we get all the kinks out of the way and this runs smoothly. So our first distribution center is going to be the North Fork Spanish Apostolate in Riverhead with Sister Margaret. If you have not yet experienced Sister Margaret, let me tell you, this woman is dynamic. She does so much. She's so excited to be part of this program, and it was just a natural fit. So you bake the 4 loaves, you drop off the bread on Monday. Tuesday morning, the bread gets delivered to Sister Margaret's at 10 a.m. and then people will take their bread. The breads will be baked right now twice monthly. We don't want to overwhelm ourselves or anybody else. We want to get this down, and that's how it's going to work. We have one drop-off point on the North Fork, Matataco. It's lovely that I can say to my kids, you'll be a drop-off point. And he's like, okay. So we have the North Fork covered with Matataco. And then on the South Fork, we will have 2 drop-off points, because I know things can get a little hectic in the summer. And we'll have one in the Bridgehampton area, and then we're going to go more west to Hampton Bays. And all that information will be sent to you. You'll sign up. You'll know where your distribution point is. You will let us know if you are going to bake that week, because this may be a week that you're away and you can't bake. And we want to keep everything, we want to keep tabs on everything. After you watch the video and you listen to me and what I said, and this all makes sense, and you're like, yeah, I'm in, I want to bake. Next step is go to our website. Go to our website, go to programs. It'll bring you down to Flower Power. Right on there, you're going to see the registration form. So we want information from you, about you. We want to, just keep everything under control. This is a big responsibility. We're baking. It's great. You're going to check in on the website. Twice a month, we are going to do little onboarding sessions on Zoom. So if you need a refresher of how everything should be, you can join in. If it's a new person who wants to get involved, they'll meet with us via Zoom, and we'll tell them exactly what the program entails. The video will always be available on the website, because you could start to bake and then you could pause it and go do what you want to do, and then go back and check and see where everything is. We're trying to make this really easy, exciting, nourishing, because we all know that there's no greater joy than giving. And how exciting that we can give something that we made by our hands, that we made with our heart, that we're going to share with other people. So I'm really, really excited about this program. And there will be time for questions afterwards. And I think we're ready to go to David. I know I'm leaving something out, but I'll get to it later, I'm sure. So I'd like to introduce next to you David Chaffin, who is on our board, and he will do a great introduction of himself and talk a little bit about the video. So David, I'm sending it over to you.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is David Chaffin. As Penny, I don't know, she gave a great introduction so far, as did Laura, so I'll just try to add a little bit to it, because I need to, right? So I am a Slow Foods East End board member. I've been a board member for, this is in my 2nd year right now. And as Penny mentioned about school gardens, I'm on the committee for that. I'm also on the Snail of Approval committee. I've been pretty busy with Slow Foods this last year, which is awesome. It's a great organization. And I hope if any of you who aren't members, maybe you will become one. It's a great organization. And I was asked to talk a little bit about my history. I've been a baker for well over 20 years. I've worked in the food industry since I was a little kid, since I was really too young to work in a restaurant. I lied about my age so I could work and get money so I could buy my skateboards. But I've been a baker for a long time. And most recently, I was the production manager for Amy's Bread in New York City. I was there for about just around 18 years. Before that, I was for another group of bakeries based out of Texas. And at Amy's, I managed a staff of, 150, 170 people. We made a lot of different types of artisan doughs, and a beautiful, wonderful place. And I taught a lot of people how to make bread. I think the recipe that I helped develop, I developed for this project, for me, it's very simple and easy. It infuses active dry yeast. There's not a starter or pre-ferments or things that I love and I think are wonderful, but I think for the novice baker, that's a little much. Even when I showed this video to my wife, she was like, well, this is a lot. but I don't think so. I think it's pretty good. And this is a bread that I'm proud to make. I'm happy to eat it myself, and I'm proud to give it away. And I see quite a few familiar faces these cubes here on Zoom that I've given these loaves to, and I know it's a good bread. I'm proud of it, and I think of it as a healthy bread. It's a whole wheat. It can be an organic, depending on the type of flours you use. I get to that in the video, but again, it uses an active dry yeast, really good flours. There's a seed mix in it. I think that really adds to the flavor. There's a little bit of honey, there's a little bit of molasses, but it's not overly sweet. It all adds to the whole thing, right? To a good loaf of bread that I think is nutritious and it's delicious. And it's a little bit of a dry dough too, so it's easier to shape. In the video, once we go into that, I mentioned in the video as well too, it can be anywhere between a 4 and a 6 hour process. Depends on how warm it is, how happy you are when you're mixing the dough, like how warm it is, all the things that, affect a dough and a bread baker. It can be a little longer, a little less, but I don't recommend pushing it or making the doughs warmer to make it faster, because that can often just make a really ugly loaf of bread. Usually a little bit slower is better. The measurements are precise, but the technique is where it's at. And that's why we did the video too. So I could show you really how you mix it and how you shape it. And then a little bit of, how I do stuff. And again, it can be a 4 to 6 hour process. And I think in the video, I said my goal was to do it in 20-25 minutes. And I failed at that. I was long-winded. It's 32 minutes. So my apologies.
It's very entertaining, and you're going to learn a lot. So are we ready to roll with the video?
So that's it. That's my introduction to it all. And then after the film, after this shows, then we'll have some time for questions if you have questions.
Q&A about either the recipe or the program itself. So Laura, if you're in charge of, who's ever in charge of getting that video going, let's roll the videotape. Perfect.
Hello, my name is David Chaffin, and I am a Slow Foods East End board member, and I have a lot of bread experience, and I'm here to show you how to make the loaves for this wonderful project we're working on, Flour Power, and we'll go into more of that details on that later. But for right now, this is all about how to make the bread for this project, and my challenge today is to take a 4 to 6 hour process and do it in 20-25 minutes. So time is rolling. So as I'm working, I will be explaining things a little more. So to start off, we need to activate the yeast. Oh, but also before I begin that, I just want to say a couple of the utensils that you'll need. Oops. I like having a digital scale. I like to weigh everything out, metric to the gram. In the recipe, we also have it in US measurements as well. So you don't have to have the scale, but I think having a digital scale is awesome. Having a mixer is incredible as well too. You could also mix this dough by hand. It just takes a little more time and a little more muscle. I also love having a small digital scale. Digital thermometer. And these are great, very accurate. The only thing you got to remember is to be sure and turn it off. It's really easy just to leave them on and then they go dead. So here we go, we're gonna begin. And to activate the yeast. Now in this recipe, I'm using Red Star yeast. That's, all the ingredients that we're using in this are readily accessible. Like you can buy it in your local grocery stores or your like mega outlet markets and stuff like that. Now in grocery stores, Red Star yeast usually comes in these small packets like this. In the bigger outlet stores, you can probably buy it in bulk, but in that bulk, that'll probably last you a very long time. So whatever you'd like to do. So I have 2 packets of this yeast in this little bowl. And then you also need a little bit of sugar in it too. I put a little bit of sugar in the raw. That's what I have at home. And the sugar helps feed the yeast. It's just good for it. And then you want to use warm to hot water to activate it. Now, if you use water that's too cold, it's not going to activate. If it's too warm, you're going to kill it. So you don't want to do that. It's got to be just right. But around 105 degrees is great. And that's what's great about the digital thermometer. Now, I like to mix it up just with a fork. I guess you could use a little tiny whisk, but that's kind of silly. I don't want a little tiny whisk. So I'm just going to use this fork. And I'm not trying to fluff it up or anything like that. I just want to try and incorporate it well. And you can smell the yeast. Now, it doesn't take very long for this to activate. And depending on how fast you are at scaling your dry ingredients and everything for this project, you could scale it now. In this case, I've scaled mine already. Now, I also, I like to often keep a little notepad with a pen so I can keep track of my temperatures and the day and stuff, because my goal is to make good bread consistently all throughout the seasons and the temperatures of my kitchen, all of that. And the way to do that is to keep track of it. What's really hard to do throughout the season is to make really good bread through warm, humid, cold temperatures. So you need to adjust that with your water temperature. So in this, I've got an organic all-purpose flour. You can also use, non-organic flour. You could use bread flour. I did a lot of testing on this, and it's all pretty universal. It works about the same. Thing with bread flour, it just has a little more gluten in it, and some other stuff as well too. But whatever you have accessible is good for that. And the whole wheat flour, I'm using an organic whole wheat flour. And there's a lot of different manufacturers, and there's people local that are doing wheat out here and milling. But again, I'm trying to use things that people can get at almost any grocery store or outlet store. If you want to go a little fancier, you can do that as well too. Now, there's also kosher salt in this mixture. I prefer using kosher salt in making doughs. And I also have a seed mix in this that is a mixture of flax seeds, chia seeds, and wheat bran that is in there. And all of that just adds to the beauty and the flavor of this loaf. Now, I want to mix this just briefly, and you can kind of see by hand with a spatula. So you can see the seeds, all of that. And the reason why, I don't know if this is baker's superstition, but I like to just make sure that the salt is incorporated well into this. I find when I add, I just think if the salt, if you have it laying on top and I add this activated yeast, I can see this bubbling already, it's bad for the yeast for it to immediately touch the salt. Maybe that's just me, but follow my directions on that. So what we're going to do now is incorporate our other ingredients into this. Now, I also have a mixture, I scaled this out earlier today. This is a mixture of vegetable oil. I often use just avocado oil, something neutral, but you could use canola oil as well too. There's molasses and there's honey. So I'm going to add that into this. Now the molasses, all of that just adds to a much beautiful taste and texture in the dough. And you can see the foam, how this is activated. And you don't want to let it go too far. It can get really high and then collapse. But this is perfect right here. And that only took a couple of minutes. So I'm going to add this. So that's ready to go. And now I'm going to add the water. Now I'm doing this all by hand right now. And I'll explain that more in just a few moments. Now I've already scaled this out. And this water is pretty cold. This is around 55 degrees. And speaking of water, you want to use really good water. You can use tap water. I don't know the quality of the tap water that you have. You can also use, my rule is, will I drink it? You want it to be good water, and just like all of these ingredients, these are really good ingredients. With bread, it's pretty basic. It's just flour, water, salt, and yeast. And in this case, some honey, some oil, some seeds, some wheat bran. And you want to use the best stuff you got, and it's going to taste really good. Now what I'm doing now is I'm just loosely mixing it with a spatula. And what often happens, so I have this spatula here, I'm going to probably end up using my scraper, and I'm probably going to use my hand too. I love touching the dough. And my goal here is just to incorporate all my dry ingredients into a loose mix. And then it's going to rest for a couple of minutes, but usually about 10 minutes. And usually during that time is when I kind of clean up my mess and, you know, maybe make a cup of coffee or something. And the technical term, baking term, when you're letting this early mix rest, it's called an autolyse. And that allows you to mix the dough less. Kind of gives you just a head start. And I want to do my best to get all this dry stuff off the bottom. Make sure all my ingredients are incorporated. So now I'm going to use my hand after all. And I'm not trying to fully get it all together, but just kind of a rough mix like that. Now, yeah, that's the fun part. You get all the stuff off your hands. And now I got to wash my hands and clean up this little bit of mess. I didn't make too much of a mess, and this is going to rest for 10 minutes. Ta-da, I've already had my cup of coffee. It's 10 minutes, autolyse is up, and now it's start time. You know, it pretty much looks about the same. Now we're going to put it into our mixer. And this is a pretty short mix. And again, my goal with this dough is to make it simple, friendly for novice bakers to do. And by doing that, it's kind of mixed at a fairly cold temperature. I want, when I'm done with the mixing, for the dough temperature to be around 75 degrees. That's why I used the temperature of water that I did. And by mixing, you increase, you know, the friction creates more heat. But this is also a dry dough. And so that's going to make it easier to shape. And we'll get to that more in just a moment. Also, this is a slightly larger KitchenAid. If your mixer is smaller and you want to, at this point, split it into 2 batches to mix it, you could do that. Also, again, it's a dry dough, and so it's going to make a fair amount of noise as we're mixing it. This is usually the time, you know, if you've got pets, they usually run into the other room. So, and with this, I've had this mixer for about 20-something years. It's a little temperamental sometimes. And I'm using a dough hook on this. You could also use a paddle if yours doesn't have a dough hook. I prefer a dough hook. And also, you could mix this by hand. Again, that would just take a little more time and a little more muscle, but you can also easily done. But in this case, we're going to use a mixer. So we start off at a pretty low speed. Usually it's around 2. So here we go. So hopefully you can hear me over this. It incorporates pretty well. You know, it's already starting to pull away from the bowl. Let's see. I find that normally mixing time is usually around 3 or 4 minutes. You don't want to over-mix the dough, but you don't want to under-mix the dough too, to a certain amount. And also, once it really starts pulling clean away from the bowl, which it is about right now, I can also increase the speed. That's also going to increase the volume of noise. And I don't know if you want to, can you see inside the bowl? About what it's looking like right now. I'm going to speed it up just a little bit about this point. But it's also, you want to be careful too. You don't want to put your hand in this. I think I'm just going to keep, and you can see that one little brow kind of pops up. Alright, okay. do now, just, because I'm keeping track of my dough, keeping my log to make sure I make beautiful breads, is I'll take the digital thermometer and see what my temperature is at this point. And it's a little cool. Well, it's coming up. It's like 72, so I'm a little cold. But that's okay. I can take my time later today. It just means it's going to proof a little slower. And that's okay. I'd kind of recommend that in the beginning anyway. So I've taken this out of the bowl. I mean, not out of the bowl at this point. I'm taking all this out of here. And now it's important that now the dough will get its first rise. And what I like to do, you can use this same bowl for that. Sometimes I like to put it in a second bowl. But what I'm going to do is take this out. You could use a dough scraper if you want. And so this is the dough. And I want to put a little bit of that oil into the bowl, just so it doesn't stick as much, and I'm going to rub it around. And now what I'm going to do, oops, it's already sticking fairly well to my hand. So my goal now is I'm not going to shape it into a boule or anything tight. The technical term for this is a blob. So I'm going to make a blob. And I'm going to drop it in here like this. I'm going to put a little more oil on top. Give it a nice pat. And then I'm going to just cover it. I mean, you could cover it with plastic wrap. I really don't like using plastic wrap, or as little as possible. I am going to use some later. But for this, I just cover it with a cloth. And then it's going to rise for, with the temperature of what I got from here, this should probably rise for about an hour, hour and a half. And now's the time when, I take my dog for a walk, or I make breakfast, or, you got an hour and a half to do whatever makes you happy. So this is going to rest like this. Now, I made a dough earlier today, because again, I'm trying to do this whole process in 25 minutes rather than 4.5 hours. So, ta-da, here's the dough that I made earlier this morning, and about 2 hours ago. So you can see it's risen quite a bit. It did dry a little bit on top. I could have probably used a little more oil. So now what we're going to do is shape this loaf, because after this first proof, now it's time for shaping. And again, this first rise is important. If you cut that time short, it's just going to take more time for it to rise later. So I have this nice cutting board here. I don't know, maybe it's just from my years as a baker. I like shaping doughs on wood. But, you could use any counter if you like. And I'm just putting a little bit of flour on this. You don't want to use a lot of flour at this point. So I'm going to take this dough, loosen it from the bowl. It's nice. And I'm going to spread it out into kind of an even square. It looks beautiful. And at this point, let's say you don't have a digital scale. You can just eyeball it and go, I'm just going to divide it into 4 even pieces. But I'm not like that. I like to weigh everything. So I have my beautiful digital scale here. And speaking of digital scales, this one's nice. It has a max of 2 pounds, and it's pretty accurate on small gram weights, which is great for yeast and salt in those small measurements. And the weight of this dough for the pan loaves is kind of heavy for a pan loaf, but it'll work out well for this thing. It should be about 750 grams. So let's see how smart I am on this. That was pretty close. I'm at 760 here. So I'm going to scale out these really quick. So there we go, 750. Oh, that one's way heavy. 750. 750. Oh, and 750. Also, I don't think I've mentioned this in earlier. Depending on the flour that you're using, when you're mixing, you might need to add a little extra water. I found when I mixed this dough earlier today, I needed to add, you know, it called for 900 grams of water. I put 975. So you might need to add, but again, it's a pretty dry dough, but this feels good. So now what I'm going to do is shape this dough, and I have my pans ready to go over here. I'll talk about pans as I'm going along with this. So shaping this, when I was first learning to be a baker, this was the part that drove me crazy. Like, how do you shape bread properly? To me, it was almost impossible. So I'll show, but again, this one's pretty easy. So what I'm going to do is flip this over. So the pretty side is down. I'm going to fold over once here and here, and degass it a little bit, spread it out a little bit. And now what I'm going to do is just tight roll. Spread it out a little bit more here. And that's it. I'm going to put it in the pan. Let's see this. I think this one will turn out a little better. And you can see I'm not using a lot of flour. Actually, there's no flour here. And speaking of pans, I don't know who's in charge of the pan producing industry, but they're all slightly different. It's kind of funny. Like these pans that I bought here, you can see there are two different types. I bought those at just a regular grocery store in the neighborhood, and they're slightly different, right? But the ideal is to go for a 9x5 pan, 9 inches by 5 inches. And but they're all different sizes, pretty close to that, and that's okay. You just don't want to be bigger than 9 by 5 inches. I was at a restaurant supply store just a couple of days ago to get some other supplies for this event, and they had some really nice pans, and I bought 4 of those. They were like 8.5 inches by 4.5 inches, and I think they're wonderful. They're pretty nice. So it's okay, just trying to get close. So you can also see how I'm sealing the loaf too. Yeah, pretty nice. So I kind of press them down a little bit. And what's nice, if you don't shape these all so crazily well, thankfully, they're in a pan loaf, so that'll cover up your mistakes. Now I'm going to put a little bit of oil on top. This is just so once it, because it's going to proof to over the top of this pan. So these are ready to go. And now these are going to, I need to cover this with plastic wrap. Now I have some over here that we'll see. But I cover this with plastic, and this will take, I would say probably, hour and a half for it to rise, and then it'll be ready for baking. It just so happens I made another batch of dough 2 hours ago, and this is, these aren't quite ready to bake, but I'm going to bake them anyway, just so we can do this within my allotted time. But normally what I would do when it's about this height, maybe a little higher, is when I turn the oven on. And I'll turn it and preheat it to 425 degrees or 420 degrees, whatever and every oven is slightly different, where its hot spots are and what its actual temperature is. But this looks really great. There's no big there's a little air pocket there. You can kind of pop that a little bit. Now, if your dough temp, it was warmer than you should have been, this at this point might look a little ugly. And a trick on that, if your loaves aren't looking that pretty, you can sprinkle a little flour on top, make them rustic. You could also take a knife, maybe not one as big as this, but you can kind of score it on top too. That'll help kind of degas and get rid of those bubbles. But these are ready to go. And what I'm going to do, and then these are those other pans. But I like these pans. They're just a little smaller than these, you can see. But they look nice. Ideally, I would probably give this another 30 minutes before I bake it, but we're going to bake it right now. So, and before I put them in the oven, I'm going to put a little bit of water on, a spray bottle full of water. I think it's not as important say with like a French baguette or a miche or you know, a more hydrated dough that you want a really thick crust on, you need a lot of steam and water on the bread. In this case, these are pan loaves. You know, we're going to make sandwiches with them, you know, or whatever you want to do with the pan loaf bread. But the water is good for this a little bit. So I'm going to spray a little bit on top. You don't have to go nuts. That's kind of heavy like that. Now I have the oven. It's ready to go. So I'm going to open this up, and there's a middle rack here is the best way to go. You know, and again, all ovens are a little different and different sizes. So I'm going to put these in here. There. You know, and just for good luck, another couple of sprays. And there we go. This will stay, you know, we'll bake this for, you know, 15 minutes at this higher heat. And then we're going to turn the oven down to 350 degrees. And I'll cover it with a little bit of aluminum foil. And the reason why I'm covering it with aluminum foil is to prevent it from over browning. You want that good spring and that color from that first, you know, burst of heat. But this way it'll allow the bread to bake out properly. And I found that it takes between 35 and 45 minutes at that other lower temperature at 350 for it to be baked. And again, I can use my digital thermometer when it comes out of the oven. You know, it should have an internal temperature of at least 190 degrees, but often it's usually like around 210 or something like that. And it's usually around this time the whole house starts to smell like delicious baked bread. This is the good
Smells
stuff.
like heaven.
And
Smells like heaven. Do you have to rotate
and
the
we'll be taking
pan?
this out of the oven soon. All right, our 15 minutes are up. It's time to turn the temperature down on the oven. Let's see. So we're going to turn it down to 350. And this is a nice oven. This is beautiful. So what I'm going to do now is open it up. And you can see here, let me pull this out. The color is really nice. This is a beautiful oven. So it's not, you know, it's a little dark, but not too much. Well, I'm a baker. I like a dark loaf. Perhaps you don't. And you can see how I'll call it how it bloomed, how it bounced, it rose once we put it in the oven. So these look pretty good. I was afraid they were going to be a little small. I'm going to give it another squirt just because I like that. And now I'm going to cover it with aluminum foil. And what this is going to do is going to allow it to bake longer without getting darker. Now you could use parchment paper, but and you want to be careful when you do this. Don't touch the heating element. Be careful. And so this allows it to bake out and be beautiful. So and what I was trying to say about the aluminum foil rather than parchment is that you can tell I've been reusing this aluminum foil over and over again for this purpose. You know, where the parchment paper is just going to brown and burn up. And here it is. So now it's going to be another, I'd say about 35 minutes, and we'll be ready to take it out of the oven, and I can show you what it looks like then. And we're going to make a little quick sandwich with it too then. Okay, it is time. The 35 minutes are up, and it's time to open this up. So let's see how it looks. I take off our aluminum foil. I'll add that to my aluminum foil ball. These look a little dark, but they're still, again, I like a dark loaf. So we're going to take these out. It's still beautiful. So this oven is a little more efficient than my oven at home, which baked it a little bit lighter, but that's okay. This is an organic whole wheat seeded loaf. So now I want to take these out of the pans. And ideally, if you know, there's a little bit of oil in the pan, so they should pop out easily. If they don't, ooh, look, see, success. And again, I bake these a little young, but these look nice. You can kind of see the tearing there too of that, you know, probably needed to be proofed a little more. So I'm putting this on a cooling rack. I want these breads to cool properly before, you know, we put them in our Slow Foods bread bags with their labels for this project, Flour Power. So these look awesome. I like these very much. And of course the whole place smells like delicious, warm, fresh bread. And one of the joy, let me just move these hot pans out of the way to cool. One of the advantages of being a baker is being able to eat warm bread right out of the oven. And speaking of warm bread, I want to just double check my internal bread temperature to make sure it's done. So you want the internal temperature to be at least 190. This is probably going to be around 210. We're up at 206 now. So this is good. It's baked. All is well. And I still have baker's hands, so it's okay for me to pick it up with my hand. And this is for research purposes only, but also I want to just double check to see what it looks like. Did I shape it well? Is the crumb, the whole structure inside tight? Unlike with a wet dough, a hydrated dough, you want to see a lot of holes. But with this is, you know, we're going to make sandwiches with this or whatever you want to do. You can see that that looks beautiful. It's baked out. You can see the crust. It's nice. I like to smell it. It smells delicious. You know, you can smell the molasses, the honey, the bran, the wheat. It's a beautiful loaf of bread. It's delicious, and it's good for you. I believe. Now, as I said, it's wonderful to be a baker, right? And so what I like to do, you know, it's always a good idea. You can have a taste. It's nice, right out of the oven. There's a little bit of crunch in the crumb of the crust. Tastes really nice. I can taste the salt. I can taste all the ingredients. Again, I think I mentioned earlier, what a big mistake that even very experienced bakers make is forgetting an ingredient. I find, like I mentioned earlier, like having a little notebook so you can learn to become a better baker. Write notes of your water temperatures and your dough temperatures and your timing. And there's quite a big window of in this process. I say it's between 4 and 6 hours. It depends on how cold it is, how cold your water is, how warm your water is. So by logging that information, you'll become a better baker. And I think of this as a pretty simple recipe. For some people, this might be complex, but it's definitely doable. If you have questions on this, you should be able to contact me through our organization, Slow Foods East End, and I'm happy to answer any of the bread questions that you would have, either about these loaves or anything else. So again, I love being a baker, and I love peanut butter too on fresh bread. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this thick end piece. I'm going to put a bunch of organic, crunchy peanut butter, probably too much, because that's the way I am. Now, and then I like bananas, because I do. So I'm going to take these bananas, put this like this, and I'm going to put a little honey on top. And this really is the best, like right out of the oven. Peanut butter's getting warm. This is good stuff. And I hope you enjoyed this process, and good luck on making your bread. And please support this project and Slow Foods East End. Have a great day. Enjoy. It's good.
That is so great. Am I on? Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Okay, terrific. I am so excited and in love with that bread, and I just wish I had a piece of it right now. So before we get to questions, of course, I did forget something because I did. So David had mentioned the bread. So part of the procedure and the first round of baking is just going to be a touch different till we get to the second round. So first thing I want you to know is our first bake drop-off day will be a week from tomorrow, Monday, April 26th. So after you sign up, it will be published where the drop-off points are. The first time when you go to bring your breads, there's going to be every time you go, there's going to be a drop-off box at each location, whether it's Matataco, High Justin, or wherever else on the South Fork, there will be a drop-off box. When you go to bring your first 3 loaves initially, you will have a bag. Lordy, can you put up the pictures of the bags now? And can I keep talking? Okay, so you see the bags. We have bags for you that will be at the drop-off point for you to put your first 3 breads in. You'll see the label goes on the front, and on the back to seal the bag is an ingredient label. While you're there, we want you to pick up 3 more bags or 4 more bags, I guess, for your loaf. So next time you go to pick up, your breads are already bagged, and then you'll be able to pick up bags for the next time. That was one of the major things I forgot. So the bread and the bags and the labels will be there. Our first baking donation will be next Monday. Okay. Now, Laura, do you have any questions you'd like to ask that have been coming in for David?
Okay, let me see here. I think someone asked about that David, it didn't look like you oiled the pans. Did you oil the pans ahead of time?
Yes, I did oil the pans. I didn't show that in there, but I just slightly, you don't want to oil them too much. You don't want to make like a fried bread, but just a little bit. And I usually kind of spread it around a little bit with a kitchen towel or something, but just lightly, not very much oil. And then I saw somebody else had asked in there if I rotated the pans, if I moved them around in the oven. And the oven I was using there is a really good oven. I didn't have to do that. But sometimes if you know your oven has cold and hot spots and things bake unevenly, of course, move them around. Otherwise, one side will be lighter than the other. But in this case, I did not have to move the pans around.
Another question is, any suggestions for managing flour choice and differences in hydration? That's the first part. And the second part is also, what's the best way to keep bread fresh?
On the flour, I tried to use, as I mentioned before, flour that, you can easily get. So I'm very familiar with King Arthur flours. You can buy it in bulk, like they have it at the big markets. I like King Arthur as a company. There's a lot of other brands as well too. I didn't want to, mention them by name, but a good one that's consistent. A lot of times, some of the smaller, fancier flour mills, the more artisanal ones, they can be very different. Every batch is very different. And then you have to either use a different amount of water. So that's the hard part with being a baker, is learning the touch and the feel of a dough, of knowing if it's too wet or if it's too dry. So it's good to have a consistent supplier. So, a flour that you trust and you're used to, it would be the best. And on how to keep a loaf of bread fresh, keeping it in a bag, sealed, is great. And, sometimes too, if it's just me eating the loaf, or, my wife doesn't eat a lot of bread, I put it in the freezer. I'll slice it, put it in the freezer, and then the slices I'll refresh in the toaster. If you've got a family that goes through bread really fast, you don't have to worry about that, right? But it should be sealed in this case. The longer it sits out open to air, the faster it ages.
Gotcha.
And what is the best way to store the bread after baking? So like before the drop off, what do you recommend? Because probably if we're dropping off on a Monday, right? People might be baking on a Sunday. So what do you suggest for that?
Well, the first thing you should really make sure you do before you pack it and put it in something, to make sure that it's completely cool. Like the loaf can be kind of cold to the touch, but it can still be warm on the inside. And if you put that in, you know, a bag or anything, the steam will come in and it'll just soften it. It'll make the loaf pretty weird. But I would, you know, I would, on the first pickup or delivery of your loaves, you won't have the bags, right? You know, so I would just put them in, ideally in paper, or anything that you could just seal it to where, you know, that nothing can get to it, right? Like I'm sure we all have clean kitchens and stuff, but I don't know if you have cats that run around and, you know, you want to make sure that it's covered, and ideally sealed, and cool, whatever works best for you.
Good. Perfect. And in response to the questions about the recipe, once you sign up to bake, we will send you the recipe all printed out and ready to go. So you will have that at your disposal, as well as the video if you need to follow along. When did he spray, or did he spray, or what did he do? You could just go and watch David and keep it going. Any other questions?
Another question I see is, what happens if we let the dough rise too much in the pan before we bake? What might happen?
Well, that's all, you know, again, that's the touch and the feel, like how big is big. Like worst case, I mean, and then it's your timing of what you're trying to do in your day. Like, worst case scenario, you could try, if it's really overdone, you could try and reshape it again. Normally what I try to do is just bake it anyway. You know, and that's either like, if there's really big air bubbles and stuff on the top, of taking a sharp knife or a razor and scoring the top of the loaf, and that'll degas it a little bit. Or as I mentioned before, you can put a little flour on top and that can just hide it. But, you know, at a certain point, if you really let it go way too far, there's not too much you can do, you know, or you make something else with it. You know, if it goes really high and then collapses, you know, then it's done. Or I guess you could press it out and make pizza out of it or something, you know, like it wouldn't make a good loaf of bread. But I find a lot of times, you know, through mistakes, you discover all kinds of different things to do. You know, just because it's not perfect doesn't mean that it's not delicious. And, you know, mistakes happen. It's okay. But again, this dough, I made it to where it'll rise very slowly. So, you know, it's not like some doughs that you have, like, you know, it's got to be just within a 10-minute window. You have a pretty large window. But this summer, when it's the heat of the summer and your kitchen is really warm, it can start going faster, right? You know, if your kitchen is hot, it's going to rise fast.
So David, tell us why Saran Wrap instead of a towel for the second rise.
Because it won't stick to it. You know, like say if you put a little bit of oil on the top and you put a proofing cloth on top, which you could, or like a traditional, like a French, they call it, you know, a couche, you know, like when you're shaping a baguette, or you could season it with with flour. But more than likely the weight of the cloth, it'll stick into it and you'll get like fabric hairs into it. I kind of just like the plastic, and you can see it and it'll kind of grow into it, but you don't have to. I guess you could just see on your cloth. But I try to really reduce the amount of plastic I use.
Okay, anyone else have any other questions? I think I got them all. If not, put them back in the chat if I missed it.
Well, I want to just again, thank you so much for who's ever choosing to go forward with this and be part of our pilot program. Feel free, if you have any local friends who want to join in, absolutely. You don't have to be a member of Slow Food to be part of our Flour Power project, although it would be nice to have you on board with us to find out all the many other things that we are doing. Our first bake will be Monday, April 26th. Someone did ask, Do you have to bake Sunday? You could bake Sunday, you could bake Monday, whatever works for you. And we will have the setup for the whole day on Monday for you to drop off, and then it'll be picked up early Tuesday morning. So it has to be there by Monday. I also want to let you know that our next Chef Series event will be Wednesday, May 2nd. We'll be celebrating Cinco de Mayo with Colin Ambrose of Estia's Kitchen. And he's got an amazing, fabulous, exciting menu. I'm really, really excited to be a part of that. It could be suggested if you want to make a margarita while that's going on and drink along with us. That could be a fun thing to do as well. It's going to be a really fun event. Again, you could find that information out on our social media, on our website. We'll be opening that for people to sign on. And again, our Chef Series are fundraisers. It's things like that that allow us to really reach out into the community, to help food pantries, to help with our resilience grants, to help keep our school gardens growing, to really make the Feed the Forks program the future of Slow Food East End. That's really how I look at Feed the Forks. It is the future of Slow Food East End in so many ways. So I'm excited. There are about 30 of us on this Zoom call. Someone else asked, how many loaves do we need? I don't know. I know that Sister Margaret feeds about 200 families a week. I think big. Yes, let's do 200 loaves, whatever. Spread the word. Tell your friends. It's going to be exciting. There will be a lot of full bellies, happy people, knowing that there are people out there who really love and care about them. And one of the ways we're showing a love for our community is through baking bread. So again, I thank you. I appreciate all of you, and everything will be on the website. If you're interested to sign up, you could reach out to me if you have any questions. My email is penny@slowfoodeastend.org, and shoot me a line. You could send an email to slowfoodeastend@gmail.com, and someone will get back to you. So questions, whatever you need, we're here to help you through this process. And I know you're here to help us make this a go and an exciting thing. So again, I appreciate you all, and I will smell bread baking all over on the East End next Sunday. So thanks very much for being part of it. And David, thank you for all that you've done. It's really great. We appreciate the recipe, and everyone else who has a hand in it and their hands in the dough. It's great. So have a great evening, and I look forward to being in touch and also seeing you on May 2nd. So
Awesome job, David.
thank you.
Bye.